Donald Trump is facing another hurdle in his run for the Republican presidential nomination. Maine is joining Colorado in keeping Trump off the state's Republican primary ballot. Steve Futterman joins us on this story. Steve, this is a contentious decision. Why don't you take us through it a little bit?
Well, it's very contentious. You may recall last week the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that Donald Trump was not eligible to appear on its ballot next year. And then last night, the Secretary of State from Maine said the same, that Trump is not qualified. This all goes back to the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. This was passed right after the Civil War in the 1860s. It was primarily to prevent people who took part in the Confederacy from holding office. It basically says if you are an officer or were an officer and took an oath of office to defend the Constitution, then took part in an insurrection, you cannot hold office. And that's why these two states are basing their decisions on that. Now, last night, the Secretary of State from Maine explained part of her rationale.
It became clear that January 6th was an attack not only on the Capitol, on government officials, but also an attack on the rule of law, that it was an insurrection, and that the U.S. Constitution does not tolerate an assault on our government, on the foundations of our government, and that Maine election law and the Constitution required, indeed obligated me to act.
And she basically said that Donald Trump knew what he was doing. She said he was sort of the instigator, that he may not have been at the Capitol, may not have invaded the Capitol, but his words instigated people to take part in the insurrection. So that's where it stands right now. Obviously, appeals are expected.
Are coming down on both sides of the legal question, but
Sure.
It could all end up at the U.S. Supreme Court. So what are we expecting to see there? What should we watch for?
Well, it almost certainly, we can't guarantee it, but it almost certainly will appear before the U.S. Supreme Court. It will make the final decision. Now, not every state is going along with this. California, where I am right now, a very liberal state, has decided to allow Donald Trump to appear on the ballot. But there are around a dozen states that are actually considering taking Trump off the ballot. Now, there will be appeals by Trump. Last night, his campaign called this basically trying to deny the American people the right to choose who they want to choose for the presidency. And even some of Donald Trump's opponents have said this is something the people should decide, not the courts. Now, one major move that the Trump lawyers will likely make is that they feel that Donald Trump has not been given his due process. They say, well, before the Secretary of State of Maine, he was not able to present his point of view. So there are many things the U.S. Supreme Court can rule on. They don't have to actually rule specifically on whether or not he took part in an insurrection. They can find some technicalities that would allow him to appear on the ballot. And most people think that will be the main argument by the Trump lawyers, that he was not given due process and that there are other technicalities that should allow him to remain on the ballot.
Thanks, Steve. We appreciate this. Steve Futterman in Los Angeles.